Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Nick Griffin Beyond the Pale. And would you believe it? I'm your host, Nick Griffin. It's great to be with you, whether you're joining me live, and we've made a really prompt English start, so there'll be a few people creeping in over the next few minutes, or whether for them as you're joining me later on. I know that most of my British viewers still have to work, so very often join me later. But whether you're with me now or then, smashing to see you. Right, let me just check that we are actually live on here. And I'm joined by Paul Telford. Hello, Paul. Paul, I'm not going to catch up with you, but I've just had, well, rather my middle daughter has just had our 12th grandchild. So, yeah. So no way catching the Telford, but ahead of some of the others. And I believe now level pegging with Mr. Dowson. So there we go. Come on, Sammy, get to it. Also joined by Ivan Cooper. Great to see you. Roger Madison as well. And Roger confirms that it's hearing and seeing good. Well, that's excellent, isn't it? Right then. So what do I want to dive into? Well, let's start off with I've got a mixture of stuff for Brits and Americans and people anywhere for that matter. But I want to start off with a little bit following on from what Jim was saying yesterday on Purge TV about the Unite the Kingdom Tommy Robinson rally in London at the weekend. Now I can confirm, because I've got people who went there and so on, that it was very much smaller than before. So a lot of good people there and some utter trash. And the last time, actually, there were so many people on the last one that the majority of the march never actually got to see what was going on the stage, which probably helped, as a matter of fact. This time, with the crowd much smaller and with huge screens hired, even bigger than before, enormous cost, this operation, everybody got to see what was going on the stage, which will mean that next time we'll probably be even smaller than before. It was a very, very interesting thing, this, that when people first started talking about the demonstration on that Saturday, it was actually going to be the anti-genocide, pro-Palestinian people, and they were going to be marching right through the centre of London, including to the House of Commons. Logical enough. It's the House of Commons which is happily putting Britain into somebody else's war and helping to murder huge numbers of Palestinians, Christians as well as Muslims, don't forget. But regardless, innocent civilians are still being slaughtered and starved there with the assistance of the Starmer government. Badenoch's only complaint is it's not good enough. And of course, people should have the right to demonstrate against that. But Tommy was boasting before this last one about how closely they've worked with the police and how wonderful the police have been, how it was great. Because the police very happily, the British state very happily used the Tommy tards as an excuse to push the pro-Palestinian anti-Zionist march basically to one side and to keep them out of the very centre of London. So, well, do you think that's a good thing? I don't think it's a good thing, because I think that the pro-Palestinian marchers have a very good point. And I think that treating them badly, whether it's by ignoring them or trying to push them to one side, will encourage the actual radicals who do really exist. There are really dangerous, psychotic, mad radicals amongst the Muslims of this country. Primarily because for years, British governments allowed Saudi Arabia and Qatar to fund all the mosques. So we've got a Wahhabized population. The Wahhabi element is diminishing, fortunately. But the way this is going, and seeing the double standards of how the British state treats people who support the genocidal state of Israel and people who want to protest against it, that is going to radicalize those people. It's going to help them to recruit more people. It's very, very dangerous for us, for ordinary Brits. But anyway, one more thing specifically about the Tommy rally is that it was theoretically Christian. There were a few crosses there and so on. And it opened, interestingly, with Kev Carroll, who's Tommy's cousin, reciting the Lord's Prayer. And he recited the full version, the Anglican version, not the truncated Catholic one that no doubt, as an Irishman, he grew up with when he was little, but fair play. But the interesting thing, well, I'll play it for you, and just see if you can spot what's interesting as the Lord's Prayer opens the Unite the Kingdom rally. Have a listen to this and we'll see if you can see.
You ready? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Thank you, people. God bless you.
So, did you pick it up? What was particularly noteworthy about that fine recitation of the Lord's Prayer by Tommy Carroll? Let me just dive into the chat and see if anyone spotted it. So, who are we joining? Oh, John Kopasaki. Good to see you, John. Excellent. No, there's no comments there, so I'm not going to hang on for very long. We've got another 15 seconds to get a comment up. There may, of course, be a lag, actually, on the comments. Okay. All right. Like you in? I'll tell you. When Jim played a clip of a group parading in New Zealand yesterday, everybody recited the Lord's Prayer along with the main man with a mic. In that case, it was basically silence. Now, they're obviously not anti-Christian, those people, because they're quite happy to go along under crosses and so on. And at the end, there's a cheer. They're happy with that. They're happy with their nominal Christianity. But how Christian are people who do not know the Lord's Prayer, or are somehow ashamed, even though when it's being spoken out in front of them, they're somehow ashamed to join in? How Christian are those people? And the answer is not very. For that matter, how Christian are people who, when the Lord's Prayer finishes, go, hooray, instead of amen? It's actually a shattering indictment of the state of basically the British lumpen proletariat, with some more decent people thrown in on top of that, to be fair. That, yeah, John Kopsaki, we were surprised if many didn't know it at all. Exactly so, John. Exactly so. It's an indictment, and it's not their fault. It's not your fault if you're brought up in a totally a-religious society, and a hardliner would say, but they could go to church, they could see the truth. They go to the church and they find some screaming lesbian or some mincing, well, this goes out sometimes on YouTube, so I better not say the word, had I? But I'm sure you get the general idea. Or if what they're taught is pure climate change applied Marxism. So they think that's Christianity. And okay, so you say, well, they could go to a proper Calvinist church. Well, do you know where one is near you? If someone in Bolton telephoned you up as a friend and said, where's my nearest proper Calvinist church? Could you tell him? Even Jim Dowson couldn't tell him. Or you could say, well, go to a proper, decent Catholic Tridentine Mass. Now, I know that in Birmingham Oratory, there's that is said each Sunday. And I know that there's one or two churches in London, but I don't know any others. If it was in Newcastle, I wouldn't know. So why should they know? I know there's a beautiful Orthodox church in Shrewsbury. In fact, there's two, one on the edge, one in it. I know those, but I don't know if there's an Orthodox church in Northampton. And if somebody asked me, I couldn't tell. And if you ask someone, even a proper Christian in Northampton, they couldn't tell you either. So these people have been deliberately cut off from our Christian roots, and they are lost. And one day, one of the great missions of real Christian nationalists all over the world, probably, God help us, including in Africa, will be to produce missionaries to the heathen English, to the heathen British, to help to bring these people back to the faith and back to their roots. I have no doubt that the pain and the horror that we're going to get in due course as various malcontents and old evildoers drag us towards civil war, I've no doubt that that will also have a remarkable effect in bringing the people of England in particular, but Britain in general, back to Jesus Christ, as well as back to common sense in general. But we're not there yet, and that showed it. Yes, indeed, he did get the Lord's Prayer wrong a little bit. You have to forgive him a bit. I'm bearing in mind that the version that he knew as a lad is slightly different in any case. And he wasn't reading it, to be fair. He's managed to mug it up, even though none of the others knew it. Right then, that is enough on that. Let me move on. And what do we do next? Yes. While we're on the, well, just moving on from the subject of that, a bit more of the double standards. That if you shout in London from the river to the sea, you'll be carted off and arrested. You've got a criminal record. You've got a good chance of going to prison if you do that on a pro-Palestinian rally. If you shouted from the Nile to the Euphrates, or if you wave a flag on an Israel protest, which shows the two blue lines and Israel in the middle, that's the Nile to the Euphrates. If you show that, that's absolutely fine. Yeah, that's no trouble at all. From that platform, I know, because as I say, I know one or two people who were there, there were hours upon hours upon hours of what the liberal elite and all the political class would call Islamophobia. And nothing is done about it. But the slightest hint of anti-Semitism at a pro-Palestinian or any other kind of protest, and they're screaming and shouting in the media from the politicians and the senior police force that these people must pay and they must be silenced. Now, what's my position on this? That it's our country. That if people want to be Islamophobic, while I don't think it's particularly intelligent, because as I said before, it can push ordinary Muslims towards the extremists, if they want to be Islamophobic, they're entitled to it. And let's face it, some Muslims have given them plenty to be phobic about. But likewise, if they want to criticize Zionism and criticize Israel and criticize the disgusting racist supremacy attitude that exists amongst the Talmudists and the Kabbalists, then of course they should be able to. Or you should be very polite to all the Muslims and very polite to all the Jews, and neither side can be criticized. But you either have to be able to criticize everybody of them. You can't criticize Jesus Christ. You can't criticize our country because you're in our country. If you don't like it, there's the door. But if you're some kind of foreigner, Sikhs, Hindus, whatever it is, then you've all got to accept that either, and we've got to accept too, either they can all be criticized or none of them can be criticized. Because if you have a double standard, that's what upsets and radicalizes people, and it's extremely dangerous. Just one more thing before we move on from this. The defendants in the current Palestinian action cases. Now, these are people who've broken into arms factories and damaged things, right? And they've broken into an airbase and damaged planes and so on. So not everyone's got a lot of time for that. But the crime they've committed a crime, is criminal damage. That's the crime. And they've been on trial. The first trial just collapsed. They've been on trial. They're on trial for criminal damage. And yet their barristers have been threatened with action, serious action over contempt of court, if they try to tell the jury that if these people are convicted for criminal damage, they get to be sentenced as terrorists. So it's a sort of secret trial where the jury might find them guilty, not knowing how serious the charges actually are and how serious the penalty will be. And I think obviously if someone admits or caught red-handed going into a drone factory and smashing things up, then you haven't got much choice but to find them guilty of criminal damage. It's obvious. They might be justified, but it's obvious. They're guilty of criminal damage. But to say that is terrorism instead of criminal damage, to say it's something that has to carry a monstrously long prison sentence, but then not to tell them that, that is truly scandalous. And if you're thinking, well, it's only Palestinians, it's only Muslims and so on, I don't really care, quite frankly. You need to be very beware of that attitude, because we live, just as the Americans live and the Australians live and so on, under a precedent-based legal system. What happens to them today can and will happen to you tomorrow, except for the fact that because our entire elite is actually far more anti-Christian and anti-white than it is anti-Muslim and anti-Palestinian, you will get it far worse. So all the restrictions on freedom of speech that we've had, and assembly as well for that matter, we've had imposed on us in Britain in the last few years, have been on the grounds because it's the threat of Muslim terrorism. It's the threat of Islamic extremism. And all the Brits have gone along, bah, yes, we want that. And then the elite turn round and they use what they sold you on the basis of people you're not really keen on to hammer you. They do it time and time and time again. And Americans especially need to be aware that you've only got 2.5 years before you've got a Democrat government. And anything that the Trump regime does now against, whether it's pro-Palestinians, Arabs, Mexicans, whatever, anything they do, Antifa, anything that regime does against them now, they're quite likely to use against you if you're a hardcore proper nationalist anyway. But certainly once the precedent is set and once the law's there, the Democrat regime of the future will use it against you. So do be warned. The same is true about whose wars you actually fight, but I'll come on to that in a moment. Let me just jump back into the chat here and have a look. Yeah, Ivan, you're quite right. You can have your son murdered and get arrested for upsetting his murderer. There was an appalling case of a young white fellow by the name of Nowak, presumably of Polish extraction, but you know, as to all appearances and everything as English as thee and me, well, to some of you. And he was stabbed, and because he'd had a clash with a non-white, the police, this is very recent, the police handcuffed him as he lay dying. Now there's a double standard for you, isn't it? Because if that had been done to a black boy, if that had been done to a Muslim kid, heaven forfend, if that had been done to a Jewish lad, we would never have heard the last of it. There would be hysteria. The police involved would already have been sacked. The police officers of that force would already be replaced. There would be howls. We'd hear nothing but for 3 or 4 days in the media, and we would be reminded of it for months. Which is fair enough. I haven't got a problem with that. I've got a problem when it's an English boy, when it's a white kid. Silence. That is the trouble. Paul Telford says foreigners shouldn't be allowed to protest in the UK. That's an interesting thought. Yeah, can have sympathy with that, but it must be applied across the board. So if that applies to people born in Pakistan, it must apply to people who come from America, it must apply to everyone who's from Israel. If it applies to Pakistanis born here, it must apply to Jews born here. Do we also apply it to the Irish? Now there becomes a problem, because what do we do to those of us who are a bit mixed? What do we do to someone whose mother's Irish and father's English? Can they demonstrate or not? So it becomes a bit tricky. But overall, certainly I find seeing anyone else's flags on my streets, whether it's people I've got sympathy with, the Palestinians, people I have utterly no sympathy with, the Iranian monarchists, CIA fools and tools and grasses and agents, or whether it's people I detest, the Zionist monsters, I don't want to see any of their flags flying in my country. Simple as that. So yeah, Paul, overall, I agree with you on that one. Right then, so let's carry on, shall we? Yeah. Whose wars? Whose side are you on in the war and so on? Well, of course, at present, we've got the Iran war. Well, we haven't, because it's sort of a phony war at present. It's on and it's bleeding the world to death in energy terms. More on that later. But just at present, it might be different in two minutes' time if Donald Trump speaks. At present, there's a sort of peace, and so it's receded a bit. But despite this, there's an intense propaganda war going on between people on the American deep state side and the Israeli side, and they run a really powerful, massively funded, it's called the Hasbara operation. It's their huge effort to massage and push and bully public opinion their way. And it massively outweighs what the Iranians have got to try and level the playing field, except for the fact that the Iranians, some of you will have seen them, they've started producing Lego videos, and it's called Military Lego, and it's an animated cartoon of Lego figures, and some of these are extraordinarily powerful and effective. There was a brutal one against Trump a couple of weeks ago, which must have done him immense damage, especially in the third world, where these things circulate in very large numbers. Long and the short of it is that at present, the Iranians are winning the propaganda war, as well as they're winning the strategic war. They haven't won the day-to-day fighting war. They got hammered in that, but strategically, they've closed the Straits of Hormuz. They're the ones who forced America's allies in the Middle East to constantly say to Trump, don't start another war, please. So, the Iranians are winning that, to the point that even if Trump now does have one more big blitz and then leaves, that's going to create immense economic and energy damage and all sorts of damage all over the world for many years. Even if he does that, I think we've now seen the end of the short century of American dominance of the world. American hegemony is over. Everybody now knows, even regardless of what happens at the end of this conflict, the emperor, the Orange Emperor, and the empire have no clothes. Now, I can understand Americans might bridle a bit about that. It's good to be the top dog, to swagger around the world and beat up everybody else. The Brits used to do it, but the time is finished. But is it good? If it makes it dangerous for you or your family to go abroad, no, it's not good. If it means that your son or your daughter or your grandson is liable to get conscripted in due course for a war which the elite of the United States of America are fighting on behalf of somebody else, is that a good thing? No, it isn't. Is it a good thing in America, where the infrastructure in many places is collapsing, where you've got an opioid epidemic of staggering proportions, where you've got vast swathes of proper real industry just not there anymore? Is it really good to spend trillions upon trillions of dollars on wars for Israel, or wars for the American oil companies, or wars for banana companies, which is what the wars of the 19th century in places like Nicaragua used to be about? Have any of those wars been good for American people who have to send their boys and girls to die in them and their money to fight them? And I would say, no, it's not. So this end of empire doesn't mean the end of America. It means there's a chance of America becoming a normal and very strong country. And I'll tell you what, that'll beat being the policeman of the world. Do you know, this is one for Brits really, but Americans can take note. We always think of the First World War as having a catastrophic effect on Britain's population, which of course it did. We lost 880,000 men killed, many more maimed or completely messed in the head. So they were lost to our culture, our society, our politics, and our breeding pool. Catastrophic. But here's what you didn't know. That at the start of the First World War, before a single shot was fired, Britain was missing 1 million men. That's in a population of 40 million. So we lost nearly 1 million. We lost nearly as many as we were already missing at the start of the war. Why were we missing 1 million men? Because they'd gone abroad. They'd emigrated, or they'd gone to be subalterns or administrators in the Sudan or whatever, or in the Congo or somewhere, and they got hideous diseases, and they got malaria, and they died in their droves, and they'd been butchered here and there by uppity natives. Or they just stayed there and then they found a new life, but they'd left Britain. And many families, many couples, young couples, left Britain. I've got, through my couple of DNA tests, I've got second and third cousins and beyond coming under my ears in the United States and Canada and Australia. So many couples left and young people left, male and female. But on top of all that, 1 million extra males left as well. That's the price of empire. You have to, you go out there and you look after it, whether it's militarily or organizationally. So it's one of the costs of empire, more a cost of ours than the current American empire, but it doesn't do you any good. Empires are for the people running them. Empires are for the emperors and their courts. Empires are not for the ordinary people. They're just like war. Now, I mentioned the military Lego videos, and I'm going to show you one, which I came across earlier on today while researching this for you. Where is it? Asian origin. Here we go. So this is a very recent one, just put out by the Iranians, and they're broadening their area of attack. They're no longer actually just, it shows how confident they are. They're no longer just sort of defending themselves in propaganda terms against the immediate Zionist and neocon onslaught. They're broadening it out and showing the whole world, think about this. This is the people who've run America for decades doing to us what they've done to other people as well. So have a look at that from that point of view, but also from the sheer technical class of this and how powerful propaganda can be, which is made for, well, a lot of serious effort, but still for buttons, money-wise, no actors, no nothing. Now, I do apologize for the fact that music is sort of rappy, because I don't like rap, but nevertheless, this has a powerful message. Have a look, and then we'll talk about Agent Orange and how, if you're an American, if you think that Agent Orange was something which only affected the gooks, the Vietnamese, well, you had to think again. So don't again look at this and think, well, not my problem. This, if you're an American, an older American, this could be your problem too.
73 million liters. It wasn't a mistake. It was a chemical ghost that never left. Look at the sky, it's not blue, it's a purple hazy 1-2 days, flying low, ending all our days. They called it ranch hand, a tactical play, but the emerald hills are all rotting away. The soil is screaming, the water is thick, falling like orange studs, making me sick. A chemical execution, silent and slow, in the world of bricks where nothing can grow. We're just pieces scattered in the dust, building a future, broken trust. Orange, falling like a silent tear. Orange, the ghost that's lived here for 50 years. 1,000 cradles holding broken gold. The story of a crime that's never been told. No mercy for the seeds they've sown. No justice for the lives they've blown. We're just the fragments of a poisoned soul, trying to be human, trying to be whole. War is a ghost, but the toxin is real. 500,000 children with nothing to heal. Twisted limbs, hollow eyes, pieces fitted wrong, while the corporations sing a billionaire song. Monsanto, Dow Chemical, counting the cash, watching a generation turn into ash. No golden trophy can hide the death. We're still fighting for air with the poison breath. Orange, falling like a silent tear. Orange, the ghost that's lived here for 50 years. 1,000 cradles holding broken gold. The story of a crime that's never been told. No mercy for the seeds they've sown. No justice for the lives they've blown. We're just the fragments of a poisoned soul, trying to be human, trying to be whole. They knew it. They sprayed it. Look at the cradle. Look at the scars. You can't wash the orange from the slave.
You ready? Our Father, who art in...
Now, I'm going to stop it there because just before I stopped it, there was a point, did you notice that there was a fella in a wheelchair? That was an American vet. It was a white man. So for all that these people absolutely hate and detest the people running America, they still, in the middle of that, make the specific point that Americans were the victims, ordinary Americans were the victims of Agent Orange, as well as the Vietnamese. And that's a very powerful human point. Agent Orange was a toxic herbicide, a really toxic herbicide. And the Veterans Association of America has made it very, very clear that Americans were the victims too, on a staggering scale. It's connected, there's suggestions that it's connected to birth defects in veterans' children, and it may even go on through generations, with spina bifida in particular being one of the things pointed out. But what is absolutely definite, there's a lack of concrete research on that, perhaps because some certain people with real money, don't want the truth unveiled. But the cancers, all sorts of cancers, the heart disease, Parkinson's, hypothyroidism, shocking health impacts on American veterans are said by the Veterans Association, who are not some bunch of crazy crackpots, anti-war loonies or whatever, serious people who are there for the veterans of North of America's wars, including Vietnam. And the Veterans Association says that 300,000 American servicemen have died due to the effects of Agent Orange. Includes men who served on the ground, men who served in the so-called brown boats. A blue boat is one at sea, a brown boat was on the Mekong River and others. And also in the Air Force, the men who distributed this ghastly poison. 300,000, according to the Veterans Association, have died. And given that only 58,000 died in combat in the whole of the north of the Vietnamese campaign from America, 58,000 dead in combat, 300,000 dead because of Agent Orange. Wow. So what's going on here? Is this unusual? And I'd say no. This isn't unusual at all. This is what elites do. See, they despise ordinary people. They despise and rob ordinary people. In fact, you can't rob people unless you despise them. So because their system is designed to rob us, they have to despise us ordinary folks. They utterly despise us until they need us to fight. And then when you fight, they wave all these little flags. And then when you come home, they dump you on the scrap heap. Now, there's an old saying, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. So they fooled us once in the First World War. Shame on us, shame on them. They fooled us again in the Second World War, and in Iraq, and Vietnam, and Afghanistan. They always do. They lie us into war with fake propaganda. They keep us going with fake atrocity stories. Then at the end of it, they simply leave you to rot. And they always do it. It's not an exception. It's always. And if we have another war, if they send British boys and girls to fight and die and get cut off on the edge of Ukraine or in the Baltics or whatever, it will be exactly the same. How do I know? Because it's always been exactly the same. And it's nothing new. I came across this and I'm staggered by this. It didn't actually start in World War I. It goes right back to the time when the British Army was last the same pitiful size that it is today, to Waterloo, the end of the Napoleonic Wars. And at the end of the Napoleonic Wars was the Battle of Waterloo, fought on June the 18th, 1815. And there were tens of thousands of men and horses killed, including about 4,000 Brits, who were either most of them killed or a few just missing, just blown to pieces completely. So tens of thousands of skeletons there in total. And the archaeologists over some decades now have gone digging and looking, and they don't find any. Where have they all gone? And initially there was a puzzle, and they did a bit more digging, and then they found out why. There's an almost total lack of human skeletons and horse skeletons, and certainly there's no mass graves on the field of Waterloo. Now let me just find a picture of the Battle of Waterloo for you. I'm sure you know what it looks like anyway, but it's a good picture. I think here we got, yeah, there you go. Gives you a little bit of an idea of the carnage. Where did all those dead men go? The answer, my friends, is they were turned into fertilizer. Yep, that's it. Contemporary accounts and later research show that there was a systematic exploitation, digging up of the graves, even in the 1820s, just over 5 years from when those men died. And it accelerated massively in the 1830s. So only 25, 30 years after they died, they were being dug up. Not one or two, all of them. There's British newspaper reports from the 1820s which describe how bones from European battlefields, but particularly Waterloo, were being collected and shipped primarily to Hull, where they were ground into bone meal and sold as phosphate-rich fertilizer. The digging wasn't done by any giant company. It was done by local Belgian farmers and then bone traders who just did it for themselves. And demand surged even further with the rise of Belgium's sugar beet industry. And the first factories in the sugar beet industry in Belgium appeared near Waterloo. Why? Because Belgium's a very fertile country. You can grow sugar beet all over it. Why did they put the factories at Waterloo? Because Waterloo still holds lots of bones, and bone char, which is produced by burning bones, was absolutely essential to filtering and decolorizing sugar beet. Isn't that quite astounding? Because I didn't know that. Did you know that? Well, tell me here in a minute. We'll have a look. Did you know that our soldiers, our heroes of Waterloo, were ground up for fertilizer? Yes or no? So there's a picture of the aftermath, famous photo of the aftermath, the evening of Waterloo, when Wellington himself is said to have remarked, "The saddest thing next to a battle lost is a battle won." Now, bone prices, when this sugar beet boom hit, bone prices in Belgium rose sevenfold between 1832 and 1837. So robbing graves was a lucrative business. There's a book, I forget the name of it. Sorry, yeah, Bones of Contention. The industrial exploitation of human bones in the modern age was edited by Wilkins, Schaefer and others, and it goes into all of this, and they document through British and Belgium and German archives how farmers near these source sites conducted excavations to supply nearby sugar factories. To be fair, in 1835, the local mayor issued a proclamation saying it wasn't permitted, but it carried on. British newspapers, occasionally expressed a bit of moral discomfort about this. There's one that noted the irony of soldiers' remains fertilizing English fields or refining sugar. But basically, bones were just another commodity. So let me have a quick dive in. Let's get rid of that picture. Let's go on. Let me dive in the chat and see if you knew this. Sickening, says Ivan Cooper. So I guess he didn't. There's some comments there about Agent Orange. Absolutely, John Kapasaki. Now, John is a ferocious American patriot. And he's there. Good for you. Good for you. Pointing out it was an unforgivable sin. It was indeed. Yeah, quite so. So I'm pretty sure we got a delay actually on these comments, because none of you, and I know you're good people and very responsive, and none of you said, did you know this or not? So I guess that'll be coming in a minute or two. But for Americans, you might, you guys joined us from well up north, beyond the wall. Good to see you, friend. Good to see you. Yes, this isn't just an American thing. Sorry, not just a British thing, a Belgian thing. It also, the same students of grave robbing and bones and so on, have found plenty of evidence that the same thing was carried out on the Civil War battlefields of the United States of America. There's a newspaper account in the Pittsburgh Gazette in 1868, so just after the war between the states. claiming that bones from battlefields in Tennessee were being collected and imported for fertilizer. Researchers found lots of instances of bone collection around Richmond. It wasn't apparently on the scale of the European Napoleonic graves, and it was also places like Austerlitz, so not big battles where the British weren't involved. But certainly it was going on in the United States as well. Quite shocking, really shattering. And it reminded me of this whole sort of thread, of my way of thinking here, of one of the most famous First World War poems, Wilfred Owen. Let's have a picture of Wilfred Owen, shall we? I know I've got a picture of him here. He was a war hero who was also, he wrote some shattering poetry against the horror of the war. And he wrote Dulce et Decorum Est, which I'm going to read a little bit from in a moment. He wrote that when he was in hospital recovering from shell shock. Once he'd recovered, he was sent back to the front, and he was killed crossing a canal in Flanders shortly before the end of the war. One of our finest poets ever. And he produced a poem about the victim of a poison gas attack, and he called it Dulce et Decorum Est, which means in Latin, it is sweet and fitting to die for one's country. It was based on that phrase, Dulce et Decorum Est, it's sweet and fitting, is in the Roman poet Horace's Odes, written 23 years before the birth of Christ. And Wilfred Owen took exception to this, which of course was a poem which every public school boy would have known at the time. The Victorians loved the Romans, and they loved this sort of rather overblown patriotism. And Wilfred Owen wrote this: "If you could hear at every jolt the blood come gargling from the froth-corrupted lungs, obscene as cancer, bitter as the cud of vile, incurable sores on innocent tongues, my friend, you would not tell with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory the old lie, Dulce et Decorum Est, pro patria mori." Powerful stuff from one of our finest poets ever, actually. So, is Nick Griffin a pacifist? Oh, wrong one. Go away. Right. Am I a pacifist? No, I am not a pacifist. Am I a coward? That's the usual reason people are pacifists. From experience, I can say that I'm less of a coward than many much physically tougher men that I've met. That's as good as it gets. Certain circumstances, I'm terrified, but I don't run away, so I guess that means I'm not a coward. But I look with much more favour on the work of the Victorian in terms of if you're going to die for something. I agree totally with Wilfred Owen. I disagree with Horace. It's not always sweet and fitting to die for your country. Depends on the circumstances and exactly what you mean. And the Victorian poet Thomas Macaulay, to my mind, got it rather better. Summed it up far better. Again, in the Victorian fascination for the Romans, he wrote in 1842 the Lays of Ancient Rome, the songs of ancient Rome. And this includes one song, the heroic defense of the main bridge into Rome by the soldier Horatius when it was being attacked by an invading Etruscan army. And Macaulay wrote this: "Then out spake brave Horatius, the captain of the gate, to every man upon this earth death cometh soon or late. And how can man die better than facing fearful odds for the ashes of his fathers and the temple of his gods, and for the tender mother who dandled him to rest, and for the wife who nurses his baby at her breast, and for the holy maidens who feed the eternal flame to save them from false Sextus that wrought the deed of shame. How can he die better than fighting for those reasons?" Now, Macaulay's lines there, applied to modern Britain, I would say strongly imply that he, and most definitely all his Victorian audience, would have agreed absolutely with the idea that it was worth risking your life. It would have been worth dying to save Britain from an immigration invasion, to preserve our cultures and our traditions and our Christian faith, and to protect our girls and women from imported grooming gangs and rapists hell-bent on the deed of shame of false sextus, but in our time with our people as the victims. So what's the difference between my position vis-a-vis Horace and the pro patria mori, it's great to die for your country, and Macaulay's, that you can't die better than defending these things? The difference is that on the one, you're fighting for a state, for a regime which you know damn well is run by criminals, psychopaths, thieves and degenerates, because with very few exceptions, they all are. You'd be fighting and dying for a system, fighting and dying for a system that hates you and yours. That's on the one hand. And no, that's not worth it. Absolutely not. No son, no grandson of mine, if I have anything to do with it, will ever go to one of those bloody wars. But on the other hand, to fight with the risk of dying for your people and for your land, that's a different matter. So say no if it ever comes up, and encourage other people to say no to dying for them. But absolutely, be ready if needs be to die for us. Now, it's better, far better not to die. It's better by far to organise to deter war. And in our case, to deter a civil war, which very powerful people want, as we said before on these shows. Or if it comes to the worst, organise at least so you've got a better chance of winning that war. And to make sure that if there's absolutely no alternative, and I believe at present there is, and I'm trying to do what I can to speak out against those who would drive us into war, whether abroad or at home. If there's absolutely no alternative, then the more organising you've done in advance of it happening, the more likely you are that you can make sure that it's others who do the dying instead of our people. Right, how are we doing for time? Good Lord, time has flooded by, and I've still got to mention the main thing actually I wanted to speak about in a way, which is Hormuz, but I can do it in fairly short order. Let's have a quick jump in here. Ivan Cooper agrees. The Falklands is British and it always will be. Well, whether it will be now, given that our Navy couldn't fight its way out of a paper bag, there's a really serious risk there, actually, a really serious risk indeed. But yeah, absolutely, defending the Falklands is something which is worth the effort of British soldiers. Although when it happened last time, they only had to, because Thatcher and Nott withdrew the very light naval and research vessel presence around the Falklands and around the Georgia Islands, withdrew them and signalled thereby to the Argentinians that we weren't really interested. If they'd sent one destroyer before the war, if they'd sent a serious number of extra troops and said, we're going to build a new airfield here near Port Stanley, if they'd done that, then hundreds of British soldiers wouldn't have been killed or hideously maimed. But anyway, there we go. That's that. I want, as I say, to come on to the question of the Iran war, because people seem, if you look at the headlines in Britain, it's almost forgotten. You know, it was a big fuss and the price of fuel went up and everyone was rather shocked. But now the battle to be the top cock, and I use the word advisedly, on the Labour dung heap, you know, that's the news. Married at first sight, whether or not people were abused on this revolting TV show. That's the news. The Iran thing has almost disappeared. People have got used to the higher prices for their driving and heating their homes. And it's already, the thing is basically being treated as background noise. Well, this is not background noise, my friends. This is the biggest single interruption to oil flows in history. And the whole of our modern civilization is based on oil and hydrocarbons. All of it. Not just our transport and our heating, but all our food, all the plastics, everything. The whole modern world is based on oil and its derivatives. And we just lost 25% of it. Now, the impact has been covered up by the fact that governments quickly released stocks from the stuff they'd hoarded for a rainy day. And there was already stock in the pipeline. And there was already lots of tankers already at sea. So that hid the impact. But even if peace was declared today, it'll take another 1 to 2 months before the exports, which would start, and not all would start immediately because some of the resources, the facilities have been quite badly damaged, but it would still take up to 2 months before tankers which started being filled today actually arrived at their destinations, and then the stuff's got to be processed. So there's a several month, up until now, we've been doing okay because we've been using the oil which was working in the pipeline coming our way before this happened. And even a couple of months after it stopped, the impact is going to keep on growing. And even if things stay as they are, we're going to face years of expensive energy, slower growth, all sorts of problems. You're going to have Chinese exports are going to be absolutely smashed. You're going to have the money pouring into the United States and the Middle East drastically reduced. That's going to create a financial crisis in the USA. You put those two things together, you've got a world recession on a big scale. This is coming for us. And there's every possibility of this going next with more open conflict, which ends up with not just Iran's oil exports being destroyed, but that of the whole Middle East. I spoke about this the other week. And if that happens, that is the destruction of over 25% of the world's entire hydrocarbon supply. And that means economic catastrophe, financial catastrophe, something which will make the Great Recession look quite mild. It's as bad as that. It's quite fitting. The Great Recession started really in 1926, exactly 100 years ago. I guess it's a coincidence, but who knows with the way some of these crackpot elites work with their magic numbers and all the rest of it. But that's what we're facing. Really, really serious. And it's not just going to be, we're not going to starve to death in Britain or the United States. But the price of fertilizer, the price of food will go up so much that we're going to have to cut back. And people will starve by the hundreds of millions around the world. And that means more refugees, more desperate immigrants doing everything they possibly can to come and live near you. This really is an enormous thing. It's the event of the century in terms of the impact this is going to have. Nothing can have a bigger impact than this other than nuclear war. And yet people seem, and governments seem to think, well, basically, there's nothing really to worry about. We can just carry on. Well, there is something to worry about. I tell you, this is going to get very nasty indeed. And it's going to speed up all sorts of political changes and economic and social clashes. If the system can afford to pay people their dole money, can keep prices down, keeps everything basically functioning, most people are sort of happy and they'll rub along together. Once that stops happening, there'll be all sorts of trouble to come. What can you do? What can we do? Well, just as individuals, you can keep your tanks topped up in every vehicle you've got. Every time you go to a fuel station, buy another plastic jerry can and fill it up with fuel as well. And take it home, keep a couple in your boot. So if you're on a long journey, when there's a scare and panic buying immediately within a few hours just strips everything bare of fuel, well, then you're going to be okay because you've got some in store in any case. Get out and stock a good supply of non-perishable food and basic household goods, including candles worth having, at least enough for several weeks, at least enough. Now, sooner or later, we're going to see panic buying. And if the crisis rolls on, that'll be of things, not just food, over-the-counter medicines. Watch the minute there's a panic on, we know how stupid the sheep are, all the toilet roll will vanish within hours of the news breaking that not enough wood pulp is arriving in this country, is crossing the oceans to provide toilet roll. So toilet rolls will disappear. You can live without toilet roll, but it's rather inconvenient. So may as well go and stock up now. So do your panic buying well in advance. And even if the crisis is solved, I don't know how, but even if it is solved, I think it's going to be solved by Trump having a huge blitz, hoping to persuade the Iranians to respond in kind against the rest of the Gulf. The Iranians will do some, perhaps not all. America will then withdraw from the Middle East. And actually, we will then move through a period of economic chaos. We will move to a better, safer world in which America is a powerful state in its own right, but isn't dominating the world. So we come full circle from where I started here. I think that's where it might end up. I don't think this is the end of the world, but it's going to be extraordinarily painful. But even if the crisis is solved painlessly, there's already inflation in the system for months and months and months, years ahead. So anything that you can afford to stockpile now will save you money in the end. So if it'll keep, And if you're definitely going to use it one day, and if you have the storage space for it, and if you can afford it, buy it now, because it's far better than leaving the money in the bank, if you're lucky enough to have money, where it's simply rotted away by higher inflation. That's where we are now. Vast political ramifications, but we'll talk about, well, in fact, not talk about, we will see those as we go through this year. Absolutely so. But this is an economic, financial, social car crash. And at present it's going slow. As we get nearer, it's spinning round and round and round. As we get nearer to the big wall, it's going to suddenly speed up. Bang. So do what you can to protect you and yours from it right now. Right, the one last thing I'll say here is that the multicultural utopia that our elite, Labour, Tory, communist, capitalist, Islamist, Church of England, Methodist, Vatican II, and crazed Zionist, all of them, all our elites have given us the multiracial utopia, saying it's all going to be fine. And those of us who said we don't think so, we've been rubbished and denigrated and persecuted for decades. But the multicultural utopia has never been stress tested. And if this crisis is unresolved for much longer, and I tell you, apart from everything else, the multicultural utopia is going to be stress tested. Now, if you're in a position when you can buy some popcorn and sit back and watch it on television, you know, fair enough. But for most people, most of us, that's not going to be the case. This very messy upheaval is going to be televised, albeit with very heavy censorship by the system. It's also going to be played out live in real streets, some of them closer to most of us than is going to be comfortable. Interesting times indeed. Right, I'm going to leave you with an end slate, which takes us back to the idea of soldiers being used and abused. This is Tommy, not Tommy Robinson. You can pick the name by accident, by the way. They knew what they were doing. No, this is the poem Tommy. And this one is not the quite harsh to listen to Peter Bellamy one I played you a couple of weeks ago. This is a tremendous spoken rendition by Roger Moore, he of The Saint and later James Bond fame, for those of us of a certain age. And I think he's done a really good job with this. So I'll leave you with Roger Moore recounting the tale of Tommy Atkins, written in, he says, 1897. Fantastic piece, and as relevant today as it ever was. I ask you to join me next Wednesday, if at all possible. Same time, same place. Share this if you enjoyed it. And do please join Brother Jim Dowson on Purged on the Templar Report tomorrow evening at 4 p.m. Until next week, then, I'll leave you with the reminder that all that is necessary for evil to flourish is that good men do nothing. You're a good man and a good woman, so get out there and do something. Deus Vult.
Rudyard Kipling in 1892, this is how long ago, he wrote A Soldier's Tale, which is Tommy Atkins. And if I might, if you'd let me, I'd like to read a few of the words from it.
I'd love you to, yeah, because last time you were here, you read a poem. Yeah.
Yeah, this is Tommy Atkins. He says, I went into a theatre, as sober as could be. They gave a drunk civilian room, but then none for me. They sent me to the gallery and round the music halls. But when it comes to fighting, Lord, they'll shove me in the stalls, for it's Tommy this and Tommy that and Tommy wait outside. But it's special train for Atkins when the trooper's on the tide. Yes, making mocker uniforms that guard you while you sleep is cheaper than them uniforms, and their starvation cheap. And hustling drunken soldiers, when they're going large a bit, is 5 times better business than parading in full kit. Then it's Tommy this and Tommy that, and Tommy, how's your soul? But it's thin red line of heroes when the drums begin to roll. The drums begin to roll, my boys, the drums begin to roll. We aren't no thin red heroes, nor we aren't no blackguards too, but single men in barracks, most remarkable like you. And if sometimes our conduct isn't all your fancy paints, why, single men in barracks don't grow into plaster saints. while it's Tommy this and Tommy that and Tommy fall behind, but is pleased to walk in front, sir, when there's trouble in the wind. You talk of better food for us and schools and fires and all. We'll wait for extra rations if you treat us rational. Don't mess about the cookroom slops, but prove it to our face. The widow's uniform is not the soldier man's disgrace, for it's Tommy this and Tommy that, and chuck him out, the brute. But it's saviour of the country when the guns begin to shoot. And it's Tommy this and Tommy that, and anything you please. And Tommy ain't a blooming fool. You bet that Tommy sees. Thank you. It's a lovely piece, isn't it? Beautiful.